with the traffic in my own city. This is unfortunate, I'm sorry. And thanks to MIDS for organizing this seminar on, perhaps the most important topic of international corporate of our times. And I'm extremely glad to see Professor Ramakrishnan, my guru, here. So the reason I became a student of international relations is it. And the last time we spoke at the same venue was for my PhD defense, I think at least a decade ago. So thank you, sir, for coming down to Chennai. It's a pleasure to meet you and listen to you, as always. Yeah, I'm sure that you had a wonderful session on the history of Palestine. I also learned from him. I still remember him telling us about, his travel in Gaza, way back when I was doing my MA. Which basically, rekindled the interest in all of us about West Asia in general. So what I'll do is that I'll speak of the region, West Asia, after the October 7 attack, on the geopolitical perspective, and how Israel is conducting a war. And then we can have a discussion at the end of the seminar. To begin with, October 7, what actually happened on October 7, is brutal, basically because most of the victims were women and children. But at the same time, Israel's narrative is that Hamas launched this war, and that we have the right to defend the war. We have the right to defend ourselves. So Hamas did launch the war. The war didn't begin on October 7, that's one thing. And the second, what Israel is doing is not defending itself. Because what has been happening since October 7 is many times worse than what actually happened on October 7. And you can look at the numbers. The war is now in the 10th month, right? And 38,000 Palestinians have been killed so far. 38,000 means roughly 1.7% of Gaza's pre-war population. And 80,000 Palestinians have been injured. And almost all of Gaza's population, which is 2.3 million people, almost all of Gaza's population has been displaced. Some of them have been displaced several times. So they were initially pushed out of Gaza city, and then they were moved to Khan Yunis, and then Khan Yunis was down, they were moved to Rafah, then Rafah was attacked, they were pushed again back to Khan Yunis, and then Khan Yunis was attacked, they were moved to Gaza city, and over the last 10 days Gaza city is being bombed, and these people are again being pushed to Khan Yunis. So this is what is happening in Gaza, right? So 38,000 people were killed, 80,000 people injured, and 2.3 million people have been displaced. So what we are witnessing over the last 10 months is one of the most terrible damages of our contemporary history. But you don't see that kind of a moral outrage coming from the world, especially from the world's most powerful countries, right? Because here, we saw that NATO passing a resolution the other day accusing China of being a decisive enabler of Russia's war on Ukraine. Whether it is correct or not, here, what is undisputable is that the United States is a clear enabler of Israel's invasion of Israel's attack on Gaza. Because just last week, Biden has sent another shipment of munitions to Israel, which the Israelis are using against the people of Palestinians. But you don't see this debate, you don't see any kind of moral anger towards this. So this is the way the war is being conducted in Gaza. And now, some strategic questions. When Israel launched the war, after Hamas's attack, what the Israelis said was that they, broadly they set 3 objectives. 1, to eliminate Hamas. 2, release hostages. Some 250 hostages were taken on that day. 3, the undeclared objective is to bolster Israel's deterrence. So deterrence, is an important concept in IR theory, right? Because what actually happened on October 7 was basically Hamas shattered Israel's deterrence. The Israelis did not expect this to happen, or this level of attack to happen. They thought Gaza is manageable, basically Israel's deterrence was shattered, so Israel wanted to bolster it. Israel wanted to send a message that if you do this again, this is the response we are going to get from the state of Israel. See, If the objective is to kill as many Palestinians as possible, if the objective is to destroy the whole of Gaza, clearly Israel is on the track. But if the objective is to defeat Hamas, release hostages or bolster deterrence, after 9 months of fight, I would say that Israel is not meeting any of its objectives, if you look at it from a strategic point of view. Because, even after, causing this kind of damage on Gaza, the number of people, the number of hostages released by Israel's military operation would not be more than 5 or 6. Because the 100 plus hostages who were released in November were released as part of the peace agreement. There was a brief truce of 6 to 7 days, as part of which Hamas had released some of the hostages. And Rear Admiral Hagari, Israel's military, Israel Defense Forces spokesperson, said late last month that Hamas cannot be eliminated. So he was basically countering Netanyahu's claim. Netanyahu says that he won't stop the war unless Hamas is eliminated. But IDF itself says that Hamas is part of the Palestinian society, so such an organization cannot be eliminated. So if you say that you can eliminate Hamas, you have to rethink your objectives. This is what the Israeli Defense Ministry spokesperson said late last month. And then thirdly, if you talk about the deterrence, if the objective was to bolster Israel's deterrence, that was basically, shattered by Hamas's October 7 attack. What happened on April the 14th was much worse. Iran launched a direct, massive missile and drone attack on Israel, which was the first time, Iran was doing a direct attack on Israel. And these were the Americans, the French, the British, the Jordanians. All of them came together, building a massive defense shield around Israel, to protect them from the Iranian missiles. Still, 7 Iranian ballistic missiles, ballistic and cruise missiles went through this missile defense system and hit Israeli military facilities. So which was a very strong message the Iranians had sent. So if the objective of one of the objectives of the war was to bolster the deterrence, that was also not, happening after these many months of the war. So from a strategic point of view, the war, I would say that Israel is basically facing a strategic defeat. But on the other side, it is definitely causing enormous damage and human suffering to the Palestinian people. And then secondly, how this is affecting the regional dynamics, So it was evident that the Israel-Palestine conflict, which had an Arab-Israel character at the beginning, in 1948, when the state of Israel was created in Palestine, it immediately triggered an Arab-Israel war, the 48-49 war. In 1956 and 1967, the wars were fought between Arab countries and Israel. Right? And in 1982, Israel invaded Lebanon to push back the PLO. So you had this Arab-Israel character for the conflict in the past. It's no longer an Arab-Israel problem. It is clearly an Arab-Palestine issue now. It's clearly an Israel-Palestine issue now. Arabs have moved on long time ago. Basically, it started in 1978 with the Camp David Agreement. And then in 1994, Jordan normalized relations with Israel after the Oslo process. And in 2020, the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan, 4 Arab countries normalized ties with Israel. So unlike in the 1978, when Egypt normalized ties with Israel, at least the Israelis had agreed to sign a framework for peace agreement, in which for the first time the Israelis recognized at least a de facto recognition of the Palestinian national movement. 1994, when the Jordanians signed the agreement came after the Oslo process, the first Oslo agreement of 1993. But in 2020, when the UAE signed the normalization agreement with the Israelis, the Palestinians got nothing. So that was a clear signal that the Arab countries were willing to move beyond the Palestine question in their quest for normalization with Israel and deepening their relationship with the United States. This was the reality, the pre-October 7 reality of West Asia. And after October 7, also before October 7, Saudi Arabia was in a very advanced stage of normalizing ties with Israel. Saudi conference was in India in 2020 September, and he gave an interview to CNN in which he said that the Saudis and the Israelis were making progress on a daily basis towards normalization. But after October 7, the Saudis may not be in a position to normalize ties immediately. But effectively, I would say that even October 7 had not dramatically altered the equation between Arabs and Israel in the region. Arab countries and Israel. There is anger, Arab street is there, but Arab governments, beyond optics, they are not ready to take up this issue. But on the other side, you can see that the Iranian-supported axis is becoming much more active in resisting the Israelis, because you will see that initially there were three responses. One was the missile attacks launched by Iran-supported militias based in Iraq. They attacked American air bases both inside Iraq and Syria as well as in Jordan, which triggered US retaliatory airstrikes on these countries. And then secondly, the Houthis, the rebels in Yemen, who are also backed by the Iranians. They declared war against Israel, but they've been attacking vessels in the Red Sea, basically affecting the shipping lines. And the United States launched a retaliatory strikes, retaliatory military operation months ago, which has been going on, but still the Houthis continue to attack the vessels in the Red Sea. Thirdly, a much more effective response from this resistance front is the Hezbollah response to Israelis in northern Israel from southern Lebanon. So a slow-burning war has been going on in northern Israel. So this is the biggest challenge Israel is also facing, because now there is a lot of talk in Israel about the Israelis launching a direct attack against Lebanon to push back Hezbollah out of southern Lebanon. But the problem here Israel is facing is that if after 9 months of battle in Gaza, so Gaza is a besieged enclave, right? It is sandwiched between the Mediterranean Sea and Israel proper, and on the other side it's the Egyptian border. Now the Israelis are practically controlling all the entry and exit points of Gaza, including its coast, including the Rafah crossing, and all the crossings, all border crossings between Israel and Gaza. So, and Gaza has been on a blockade since 2007. And from October 7, it's been completely besieged. So in a besieged enclave, and Israel is a much powerful military force from a conventional point of view compared to Hamas. Hamas is a ragtag militia fighting with rockets and automated guns and very limited ammunition. But even after 10 months of fighting, if Israel is finding it difficult to defeat even Hamas in Gaza, imagine a war with Hezbollah would be completely disastrous, because the last time the Israelis fought Hezbollah was in 2006. It didn't end well for Israel. So there is a talk about expanding the war towards Hezbollah, but it's not going to be easy. That's why the United States is also trying hard to basically, prevent the war from escalating. The Americans are okay as long as Israel is continuing to attack Gaza, but they don't want the war to expand into Lebanon with Hezbollah and Israel, and then bringing in other countries, including mainly Iran. So, if you look at it from a strategic point of view, after 9 months of fighting, the war in Gaza remains unfinished. The hostages are still hostages. And much of Gaza has been destroyed, but Hamas still stands and is still fighting from pockets of Gaza. And in Israel's northern border with Hezbollah, Israel is increasingly facing a major security challenge, which could escalate into a major war. But Hezbollah is also, at this point of time, Hezbollah is also undeterred. Even yesterday, one Israeli reservist was killed by a Hezbollah drone attack. And the Palestinian question is back to the center stage of West Asia, because I think once the dust settles, there will be questions which everybody will have to answer, and Israel cannot, I hope so at least, that continue to maintain the pre-October 7 status quo once the dust settles, because the issue, if the Palestinian issue had been pushed to the margins of West Asia before October 7, it's now back in the center stage of West Asia. And then, thirdly, the Iran-backed resistance, the axis of resistance remains defiant and very strong. And then another point is that Iran itself is, especially in the last few months, Iran has fast expanding its nuclear program as well. So Israel at this point of time had no other options but to live with it, because I don't think that Israelis have the stomach to go for a full-scale war with Iran. Even with Hezbollah, they are, not completely on board. So, the strategic challenges Israel is facing after October 7 are actually huge compared to the pre-October 7 reality of West Asia. But at the same time, Israel still manages to continue the war because of the support it enjoys from its powerful allies in the West. Just to put things in perspective, again, if I draw parallels between the war in Russia, the war in Ukraine, and the war in Gaza. So the Russians bombed the hospital just last week in Kyiv, a children's hospital. And on that day, at least 42 Ukrainians were killed, including 2 people in the hospital. That triggered a massive international response, which is fine. I mean, it should be like that. I mean, if you are targeting civilian locations, there has to be moral response. And President Biden himself said that this is barbarity, right? This cannot be accepted. But for the last 10 days, Israelis have been continuously attacking Hamas, targeting hospitals, schools, shelters, refugee camps. So Rafah, we saw what actually happened, right? Because Rafah is a small town close to the border with Egypt, where 1.3 million people were living. Rafah's pre-war population was 600,000 or something. And Rafah was being carpet bombed a few months ago, including the refugee camps. The 10 camps of Rafah were bombed. There was no major response from the West. And the United States continues to ship weapons to Israel. And nobody is even asking this question. So Israel, and my point of view is that Israel has faced a lot of strategic mistakes, setbacks after this war. This is not 1967 anymore, when Israel defeated all Arab countries in 6 days. That time is gone. So after 9 months of war, Israel is still struggling to meet its strategic objectives in the region. And the region is becoming increasingly hostile towards the state of Israel. But it still manages to continue to attack without facing any international repercussions. Is there any sanctions against Israel? Is there any talk of sanctions against Israel? Will the UN Security Council be able to censure Israel? No. Nothing is going to happen. Why? Because Israel is being protected by the world's most powerful countries. So this is the world we live in. I'll end it here. Thank you very much, and then we will take this discussion further in the Q&A. Thank you.